The sliding doors at Mercy General opened the way they always do. Automatic, indifferent, letting in whoever walks up. I had my driver's license in my hand before I even reached the front desk because I'd learned something about hospitals over the past 2 weeks. You don't wait to be asked. You lead with what makes you legitimate. My father was on the 4th floor. I knew his room number, his nurse's name, and the fact that his cardiologist had cleared him for a brief meeting that morning. I knew all of this because my father had called me himself 3 days ago and told me. His voice had been tired but steady. He'd said, "Tuesday morning, be here by 9. I need you to witness something." I hadn't told my brother I was coming. That was the mistake I didn't know I was making. The woman at the front desk had the kind of efficient smile that means nothing personal. She typed my name into the system, and I watched her face the same way I watch a weather forecast, not for comfort, but for information. Her smile didn't change exactly, but her fingers paused. She looked up at me. "I'm sorry," she said. "I'm showing a visitor restriction on this patient." I kept my voice even. "Can you tell me what kind of restriction?" "I can't give details," she said. "But your name is flagged. I need to ask you to wait here." She picked up her phone before I could respond. Not threatening. Just procedural. The way you flip a switch without thinking about what it turns off. I stayed where I was, hands loose at my sides, and I did the math. My brother had been in that hospital every day for 2 weeks. He'd introduced himself to the nurses, brought coffee to the front desk staff, made himself the face of our family in a building where faces matter. I had been 3 states away, wrapping up a job contract that couldn't be abandoned overnight, calling my father every evening, sending flowers, making arrangements for exactly this visit. I had done everything right from a distance, and my brother had done everything visible up close, and now my name was flagged. A security officer appeared from a side hallway. Not aggressive, just present, the way furniture is present in a room that's been arranged to make a point. He was younger than I expected, with a patient face that had seen this before. "Ma'am," he said, "I'm going to need you to come with me." "All right," I said. "Can I ask why?" "We have a concern on file," he said. "It'll just take a few minutes." The security office was small and smelled like recycled air and old coffee. There was a desk, 2 chairs, and a wall-mounted screen that faced away from me. The officer sat down, typed something, and didn't offer me a seat. I took one anyway because standing is what people do when they're nervous, and I wasn't nervous. I was focused. "Your name is Claire Merritt?" he asked. "Yes," I said. "You're here to visit a patient on the 4th floor." "My father," I said. "Dale Merritt. Room 412. His cardiologist is Dr. Sandra Okafor. He called me himself on Saturday and asked me to come this morning." The officer typed. He didn't respond to the detail immediately, which meant he was reading something that had already filled in his expectation of me before I arrived. That's the danger of a file. It tells a story before you get to speak. "We received a concern," he said carefully, "regarding your visit today." "From who?" I asked. He paused just slightly. "From an immediate family member." I didn't ask him to confirm the name. I already knew it. My brother Marcus had the same instincts my father had, except my father used them to build things and my brother used them to protect what he thought was already his. Marcus had been running the family's small property management business for 6 years while I worked elsewhere, and when our father got sick, Marcus had positioned himself as the responsible one by the simple act of being physically present. It wasn't malicious at first. It became malicious when my father told Marcus he wanted to update his estate documents. That was 10 days ago. My father had told me about that conversation too. Marcus had not taken it quietly. "What does the concern say?" I asked. The officer glanced at the screen. "The reporting party states that you've been estranged from the patient for several years, that the patient has expressed discomfort about your visit, and that your presence could cause undue stress and potentially worsen his condition." He paused. "They also state you made threatening comments during a recent family phone call and that they're concerned about what you might say to him." I let that sit for a second. Threatening comments. Estranged. Undue stress. Every word had been chosen to sound medical and cautious instead of what it actually was, which was strategic. My brother didn't need to say anything that sounded like a lie. He just needed to say things that made institutions slow down. I leaned forward with my hands flat on the desk between us. "Officer," I said, "my father called me himself on Saturday. The call is in my phone. I have the voicemail he left me 2 weeks ago asking me to come, and I have his written note, which he mailed to me, because my father still sends letters, asking me specifically to be present this Tuesday for a document he wanted to sign. I am not estranged. I am not a threat. and his condition is exactly why I'm here. The officer's expression didn't shift dramatically, but he stopped typing. You said you have a voicemail? He said. I have two, I said. I also have the letter. And I have screenshots of our text messages from the past 14 days, including one where he tells me he spoke to his attorney and needs a witness who isn't a beneficiary to the documents being signed. That last part changed something in the room. He mentioned an attorney? The officer said. Yes, I said. Because what my father is signing this morning is a revised medical power of attorney and a codicil to his will. My brother is currently named as the primary decision maker on both. My father wants to change that, and the only person in this building who doesn't want that to happen is the person who filed this concern. The officer looked at me steadily. Then he looked at the screen again. Then he said something that told me he was starting to understand the shape of what he was holding. The concern was filed yesterday evening, he said slowly. The day before I'm scheduled to arrive, I said. Yes. He picked up his radio and spoke into it quietly. I caught the words patient advocate and fourth floor and family dispute. He set it back down. I'm going to need to verify some of what you're telling me, he said. The voicemail, the letter. Of course, I said. Do you want me to play it now? He nodded. I opened my phone and found the voicemail from Saturday. My father's voice came out of the speaker low and deliberate, the way it always is, when he's being careful about his words. Hey, sweetheart, it's me. I need you to come Tuesday. 9 o'clock. I've talked to Gerald, that was his attorney, and he says I need someone there who's not going to benefit from what I'm signing. You're the right person. Don't tell your brother yet. I'll explain when I see you. I love you. Come. The officer listened without moving. When it ended, he looked at the timestamp on my screen, and then he looked at the date the concern had been filed. He was doing the same math I had done in the lobby and arriving at the same answer. He called you after business hours Saturday, the officer said. Yes, I said. After Marcus had been here that afternoon. I think something happened during that visit that made my father want to act quickly. The officer nodded once and stood. I'm going to contact the patient advocate. Will you wait here? I'll wait, I said. While he was gone, I built the folder on my phone that I should have built before I ever walked through those sliding doors. I pulled up the photos I had taken of my father's handwritten letter. I screenshot our texts in order, starting from the day he was admitted and ending with Sunday, when he told me he was looking forward to seeing my face. I organized the voicemails by date and prepared to forward them to any email address someone gave me. My brother had filed a concern the night before. He'd had 12 hours to shape the story. The patient advocate arrived before the officer came back. Her name was Denise Albright, and she had the specific kind of energy that comes from spending years watching families collapse around a hospital bed. She wasn't warm exactly. She was precise. She sat down across from me and opened a notebook, actual paper, and looked at me without the filter of a screen between us. Tell me what's happening, she said. I told her everything, in order, without editorializing. My father's call Saturday, his letter, the content of what he wanted to sign, my brother's history managing the business, the estate, the finances, the concern filed last night, the visitor restriction I walked into. She wrote steadily. She didn't react to any of it, which meant she was hearing it as information rather than drama, which was exactly what I needed. When I finished, she said, Has your father ever told you directly that he feels pressured by your brother? He said Marcus got upset when he mentioned updating the documents. I said, He used the word upset. He didn't say more than that. But he asked you not to tell Marcus you were coming, she said. Yes, I said. She wrote that down. All right, she said. I'm going to go speak with your father directly. Alone, without family present from either side. That's protocol for a patient advocacy visit when there's a family dispute. She paused. If he confirms that he wants you here and that the concern was filed without his knowledge or consent, we'll address the restriction. And if he's been told something about me that changed his mind, I said. She met my eyes. Then we'll deal with that too, she said. Either way, we find out what the patient actually wants. Not what someone else says he wants. She left. I sat in that room for 22 minutes. I know because I watched the clock, not because I was anxious, but because time was the only resource I couldn't replace. My father's attorney was scheduled to arrive at 9:15. The codicil couldn't be signed without a qualified witness. If I was still in a security office at 9:16, the morning collapsed and my brother would get another day to work with. At minute 18, my phone buzzed. A text from a number I didn't recognize. Then I looked at the area code and my chest went cold. It was my brother. I know you're here. Go home, Claire. You're going to stress him out and he doesn't need that right now. He asked me to reach out and ask you to leave. He doesn't want this today. I read it twice. My brother didn't know my father had called me Saturday. He didn't know about the letter. He thought he had the narrative sealed and that a text from him would be enough to make me walk back through those sliding doors the same way I came in. I took a screenshot of the text, time-stamped, and sent it to my own email. Then I sent another email to myself with every piece of documentation I had so far, voicemails, photos of the letter, screenshots of texts, because I understood something clearly by then. This wasn't just about getting into a hospital room. This was about what came after. If my father signed those documents today with me as witness, my brother would challenge it. He would say I had pressured my father, that I had shown up uninvited, that I had used the visit to influence a vulnerable man. Every detail of this morning would become evidence in a future argument, and I needed my version of events to be airtight. My brother sent 2 more texts while I waited, each one slightly more urgent than the last. Each one slightly more specific about my father's condition, his fragility, his need for calm. None of them said anything my brother could be proven to know. They were just pressure dressed up as concern. At minute 22, Denise Albright came back. She sat down, crossed her hands over her notebook, and said, "Your father is alert, oriented, and very clear about why he asked you to come today." I breathed out through my nose. "He's aware of the concern that was filed," she continued. "He was not consulted before it was filed. He is also aware that his son sent him a message this morning telling him that you'd decided not to come." She paused, just slightly. "That message was not accurate. Marcus told my father I wasn't coming," I said. "Apparently," she said. "Your father said he was relieved to know you were actually here." My throat tightened the way it does when something has been wrong for a long time and suddenly becomes right. "The visitor restriction," I said, "is being removed," she said. "I've already spoken to the front desk." She looked at me steadily. "I'm also documenting this visit in full, including the concern that was filed and the patient's response to it. That documentation will remain in your father's record." "Can I get a copy?" I asked. "I'll have one ready for you before you leave," she said. I stood. She stood too and gathered her notebook. Then she said one more thing, the way people say the thing they've been deciding whether to say. "Miss Merritt," she said, "your father asked me to tell you to hurry," he said, and I'm quoting here. "I didn't drive myself crazy, raising 2 kids just to have one of them rewrite the ending." I almost laughed. That was exactly how my father talked. The 4th floor smelled like antiseptic and overcooked food, and somewhere under all of it, the specific quiet of people waiting on outcomes. I walked past the nurse's station, where 2 people glanced at me without concern because Denise had been here before me and cleared the path. Room 412 had its door half open. I knocked anyway. "Get in here," my father said. He looked smaller in the hospital bed than he did in memory, the way people always do when you see them hooked to monitors after only knowing them in the full version of their life. But his eyes were the same, sharp and direct and a little impatient, and when he saw me, they did the thing eyes do when someone you've been waiting for finally walks through the door. I sat in the chair beside him and took his hand and didn't say anything for a moment, because there wasn't anything that needed to be said first. "Marcus filed a concern," I said eventually. "I know," he said. "He told me last night he was worried about you coming. I told him I'd handle it." He looked at the ceiling. "He handled it differently than I meant. He also texted you this morning saying I'd decided not to come," I said. My father's jaw tightened. "I figured it was something like that when the advocate told me you'd been in the security office for 20 minutes. "He's been busy," I said, not bitterly, just factually. My father turned his head and looked at me. "He's been scared," he said. "That doesn't excuse it, but that's what it is. He thinks if you're here, I'm going to change everything, and he won't have anything left to hold on to." "Are you going to change everything?" I said. "I'm going to make sure things are fair," he said, which isn't the same thing. Gerald arrived at 9:20, 5 minutes late, apologetic and carrying a briefcase that looked like it had witnessed 30 years of families trying to outwit each other on paper. He was a thin man with reading glasses that he put on before he'd even fully sat down, and he explained the documents with the kind of practiced patience that meant he'd given this explanation many times before. The revised medical power of attorney would give me and my brother equal and joint authority over medical decisions, replacing the current document that gave Marcus sole authority. The codicil to the will didn't change the distribution of assets. It added a clause requiring both of us to sign off on any sale or transfer of the property holdings, rather than allowing either party to act unilaterally. "Your father's concern," Gerald said carefully, adjusting his glasses, "is that acting alone, either one of you could make a decision that harms the other's interest. This makes it collaborative." My father looked at me. I trust you both, he said. I just don't trust what fear does to people when the stakes feel high. I thought about my brother in that security office, writing a concern about my mental stability with the same hands he'd used to show up every day for 2 weeks. I thought about the texts this morning. I thought about how much of what he'd done was calculated and how much of it was just someone who was frightened and had made the calculation that fear gave him permission. I understand, I said. The signing took less than 10 minutes. Gerald witnessed. I witnessed. My father signed on 3 pages in a hand that was slower than it used to be, but no less certain. When it was done, Gerald gathered the documents with the careful efficiency of someone who knew they were holding something that would matter later, and said he'd have certified copies to both of us by end of week. After he left, my father and I sat together in the particular quiet of something finished. Marcus is going to be upset, I said. He's going to be upset, my father agreed. And then he's going to be okay, because nothing was taken from him. He just can't act alone anymore. He paused. Neither can you. I know, I said. He squeezed my hand once. The advocate. The security thing this morning. He looked at me. Are you going to keep the documentation? Yes, I said. Good, he said. Because Marcus is going to tell a story about today that isn't accurate, and you're going to need the receipts. That was my father. Even lying in a hospital bed after a cardiac event, still thinking 3 moves ahead. I was in the elevator when my brother called. I let it ring once, then answered. Claire, he said, and his voice was tight in a way that meant he already knew the visit had happened. I need to talk to you about what you just did. All right, I said. Dad is not in any condition to be making legal decisions right now. He's on medication. He's exhausted. You came in here and pushed him into signing something he wasn't ready for. I stepped out of the elevator into the lobby and found a quiet corner near a window. Marcus, I said. Dad called me Saturday and asked me to come. He mailed me a letter. He told his attorney he needed a witness who wasn't a beneficiary. This was his plan. Not mine. You always do this, he said. You show up at the last minute and act like you're saving the day. I came when he asked me to come, I said, which was Tuesday at 9. I arrived Tuesday at 9. Your concern is what made me late. Silence. I filed that because I was worried about him, Marcus said, and his voice had changed, slightly softer, slightly defensive in the way that means the performance is starting to drop. You filed it the night before I was scheduled to arrive, I said, after Dad told you he was updating the documents, and you texted him this morning saying I wasn't coming. More silence. He was upset, Marcus said. I didn't want him to be upset when you didn't show. Marcus, I said, steady. I have the voicemail where he asks me to come. I have his letter. I have the texts. I have documentation from the patient advocate's office. And I have your text to me from this morning saying he asked you to reach out and tell me to leave, which he confirmed he did not do. I let that sit. All of this is documented. If you decide to challenge what was signed today on the basis of competency or coercion, everything I just described becomes part of that record. The line went quiet in a way that was different from the pauses before. This one was someone realizing the shape of the ground they were standing on. I'm not challenging anything, he said finally. Good, I said. Then we're on the same page. Claire. His voice was smaller now. I just didn't want to lose everything. Nothing was taken from you, I said. It was the same thing my father had said. Because we had been raised by the same person. And my father had been right. You still have your role. You still have the business. You just have to do it with me now. He didn't respond to that. I'm going back upstairs to sit with him for a while, I said. You should come too if you want. He'd like that. I hung up before he could decide how to feel about it. At the front desk, on my way back to the elevator, I stopped and asked for Denise Albright. She appeared from the hallway within 2 minutes, which told me she hadn't gone far. I wanted to get that documentation copy before I go back up, I said. Already printed, she said, and slid a sealed envelope across the counter. It includes the concern as filed, the timestamp, the patient statement, and the outcome of the advocacy visit. I tucked it into my bag alongside the copy of the signed codicil that Gerald had given me. Can I ask you something? I said. Sure, she said. Does this happen often? Family members filing concerns to block other family members? She looked at me for a moment. Often enough, she said, that we have a protocol for it. I nodded. Thank you for the protocol. She almost smiled. That's the job, she said. My father was asleep when I got back to room 412, the afternoon light going gray through the window, monitors steady and unhurried. I sat down in the chair beside him and pulled out the envelope from Denise's office, the printout from Gerald, my phone with all its screenshots and voicemails, and laid them on my knee like a hand of cards dealt out honestly. My brother had tried to use a hospital the same way, filed a concern the night before I arrived, sent a text my father didn't authorize, tried to turn the building's own protective systems into walls. But institutions aren't loyal to the person who gets there first. They're designed to find out what's true. You just have to know how to ask. My father stirred. "Still here?" he said, not fully awake. "Still here," I said. He settled back without opening his eyes. "Good," he said. "Stay." I stayed until the monitors dimmed and the hallway sounds softened into the particular hush of a hospital in the late afternoon. I stayed until the nurse came in for the 4 o'clock check and told my father his dinner was on its way and asked me if I wanted coffee from the family lounge. I said yes, and meant it. Small things matter after a long morning. Before I left for the night, I checked my email one more time and found a message from Gerald. Certified copies dispatched. Both parties notified. Effective immediately. I forwarded it to my own archive, which by that point had 7 attachments, 2 voicemails, 14 screenshots, a letter photographed in natural light, and an envelope from the patient advocate that I intended to keep in the same drawer where I keep the things that matter. My brother texted me that evening. Short, no argument, no performance. He just said, "I'll be there in the morning." I wrote back, "See you then." Not forgiveness exactly. Not a clean ending. More like 2 people who share a father deciding, quietly, that the morning's damage had a ceiling. If you made it all the way here, I want to ask you something. If you'd been in that lobby and the front desk told you your name was flagged, would you have pushed back or walked out? And what would you have done if it was your own brother who filed the concern? Tell me in the comments. And if you've been through something like this with family and property, if you've had to fight for your place at a table that was supposed to already have a seat for you, I want to hear about it. Hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one.